scored 70 points and have probably this week's number one waiver wire option if he's out there. Hey, Tank Dell, we talked to you guys about him last week on the waiver wire show. Hope you picked him up. If not, you may have missed your chance on him. The Los Angeles Chargers came through for us. The Jacksonville Jaguars, not so much. And is it time to panic on the New York Jets backfield? We're going to get into all of that right now. I am your host, Matt Mormann. Welcome in to the ADP, the Average Dudes podcast. And this is your week 3 recap. We're already through 3 weeks of the NFL season. It flies by once we get into this thing. So I'm just going to go game by game real quick, and we're just kind of run through a couple headlines from each game and a couple things to take away from each one. So we're going to start things out here with the Tennessee Titans 3, the Cleveland Browns 27. And, you know, I kind of just chose these games in the order that I saw them listed on the box scores here. And I'm kind of regretting kicking off with this one because the Tennessee Titans looking completely helpless on offense today. We didn't really see too much from the passing game with Ryan Tannehill only going for 104 yards. DeAndre Hopkins did get 7 targets and 3 catches. Traylon Burks getting 6 targets, only 1 catch for 5 yards on that, however. So we did see the guys who want to get targets get those targets today, at least from Tennessee. Gives you a little bit of hope for things moving forward. I'm still kind of wondering, is Ryan Tannehill's clock ticking? How much longer does this go on for? Only scoring 3 points against a good defense in Cleveland. But to me, I just wonder how much longer we're going to see him running the helm there. Derrick Henry, we see this happen a couple times through each year, right? Where Derrick Henry, he's not real involved in the passing game. And so when they trail him to throw more, he kind of gets phased out of it in the game script. That's what happened here. And so Derrick Henry, only 11 carries, 20 yards, only puts up 2 points for you in fantasy today. You know, he's been one of the top running backs in fantasy going into this one. Definitely gave you a big letdown here in week 3. On the Brown side of things, Deshaun Watson finally coming through with a serviceable game. Not great, but serviceable. He gave you 25 fantasy points in a 6-point per passing touchdown game league. 289 yards, 2 touchdowns. There's not much more you could ask for out of him in this one. It was a very easy matchup, though. That Tennessee secondary, they've been a mess through the first 2 weeks. They were a mess again today, and he was able to take advantage. And Amari Cooper came through in a big way with 8 targets, 7 catches on those targets, 116 yards and a touchdown. Elijah Moore also coming through with 9 catches on 9 targets for 49 yards. So a couple guys there in the Cleveland Browns in the Cleveland Browns passing game that, you know, you've drafted Cooper to be a starter. He's been in your lineup. Elijah Moore has really come through for those who thought he was a sleeper so far this season. He's a guy who I was not as in on as everybody else was. He was rather cheap though. And but he's definitely, to me, he's shown some good things in this one for sure. Just getting the targets, 7 and 9 and 9 in his 3 games so far this season. So that's definitely been good for Elijah Moore. Jerome Ford might be a sell high after this one. You know, it's a very tough matchup there with Tennessee. He was able to get in the end zone twice, but he had 10 carries, only got 18 yards on it, and then he had 2 catches on 3 targets for 33 yards. Kareem Hunt looming, didn't play much in this one, his first game with the team. 5 carries for 13 yards, so not a lot out of Kareem Hunt, but he is coming, he is looming, and so that makes you a little bit nervous. Maybe you can try to sell high on Jerome Ford. Next game, the Atlanta Falcons 6, Detroit Lions 20. And in this one, the big story going into it was Jahmyr Gibbs. What was his opportunity going to be like? Was he going to get all of that work that was vacated by David Montgomery? And he really did. He got 17 carries, got 80 yards out of it. Kind of a very David Montgomery stat line there. 1 catch, though, for 2 yards. You really would have liked to have seen him get more targets in this one. And that's where you would really like to see him really make his hay in this offense. And that just didn't happen. So it ended up only 8.7 points for you in PPR today. Kind of a letdown, I think, when you heard how much work he was going to potentially get with Dave Montgomery out. And quite frankly, he did get the work. He was the only guy of relevance in the backfield. Craig Reynolds did nothing. Bam Knight did nothing. You might remember him from that stretch run last year for the Jets. He got 3 carries in this one. Amon-Ra came through for you, just as you'd expect, 9 catches, 100 yards. Josh Reynolds gets blanked on this one, and that's a big bummer after he was so useful for the first 2 weeks. I was really excited for what he could do in this matchup. Next week at Green Bay, I think he could still be a low-end desperation flex for you, though. I do. Even though he got no targets this one, Cleve Raymond got 6. Only, the really narrowed down passing offense today for the Detroit Lions. Only a handful of guys getting those targets, one of which, when you talk about Sam Laporta, getting 8 catches on 11 targets, 84 yards, and a touchdown. And look, I was skeptical on all these rookie tight ends going into this season because if you've bet against rookie tight ends in the past, you've won a lot more than you've lost. Laporta is definitely looking like a guy, and he's one that I, towards the end of draft season, came around on as kind of a sleeper pick. He has a role in this offense. He is very useful in this offense, and these kinds of games can happen for him. I think last week's a bit more realistic. He did break I believe it was 49-yard or 45-yard touchdown in this one. But he had 11 targets, 8 catches, 84 yards, and that touchdown. You'll love to see it for Sam Laporta, the rookie. On the flip side of things, let's start with the tight end in Atlanta. Kyle Pitts, he gets 5 catches on 9 targets and 41 yards. His best game of the season, as the Falcons continue to just be so frustrating for fantasy. You can't count any of these guys. Drake London had 2 catches for 31 yards. He got 6 targets. Bijan, only 10 carries, 33 yards, 4 catches and 27 yards on that. So he got you 8 PPR points. Not much to go there. And Tyler Algier, he got 7 carries. It's not like you can use him really as like a flex option or a desperation RB2 either. It's just kind of a useless offense for fantasy. They only scored 6 points against Detroit. Not what you want to see out of those Falcons. Next up, New Orleans 17, Green Bay Packers 18. Tanner Ward in attendance, rallying the troops as the Packers make an 18-point fourth quarter comeback. And that's kind of where I actually want to start with this, is don't let that final score fool you. This was a negative game script for the Green Bay Packers, and they really were able to kind of turn that into a little bit of something here. Jordan Love didn't look great for most of this game, I would say, but he turned in a very nice performance for you. Got you 26 points, 259 yards, a touchdown, a 2-point conversion, a rushing touchdown also. He did throw 1 pick. On the receiving end of things, Jalen Reed continued to kind of impressing me a little bit here. He had 3 catches on his 7 targets for 63 yards. And then Romeo Doubs, man, he is definitely – look, I don't know how much longer Christian Watson's going to be out. Hopefully not much longer, because you really see what Watson can do and bring to this offense. Doubs continues to be an option that you can play, though. I think definitely as a flex. He had 73 yards on 5 catches, and he got in the end zone. But let's talk about this run game a little bit here. A.J. Dillon is a guy who for 4 years now, this is year 4, where he's kind of been thought of as this high upside handcuff running back who, if Aaron Jones ever gets hurt or if Aaron Jones ever left the Packers, that A.J. Dillon would just be this monster of a running back. And, we've seen flashes of that over the previous 3 years in kind of those short spurts and short opportunities. I think I'm done, though. I'm done considering A.J. Dillon a high-end handcuff. He's a guy who, when Aaron Jones is out, he can get the work, but I don't have any more expectations of him having big games with that opportunity. Look at what we just saw out of DeAndre Swift, right? When Kenneth Gainwell was out. Look at what we've seen out of, Jerome Ford, not real efficient, but he got in the end zone twice. Jahmyr Gibbs getting that big workload. He didn't come through to a great extent. You would like to see more targets, but at least he kind of gave you something. A.J. Dillon is becoming one of my least favorite handcuffs, and he cost you to acquire him in the draft this year. And I think I'm pretty much done with considering Dillon a higher-end guy anytime that Aaron Jones misses time. On the Saints side of things, they did have an injury to Derek Carr, the quarterback here. So that's going to throw things into a little bit of limbo. But you've got Jameis Winston that's going to walk into this offense, and that's exciting. We know what Jameis can be. And, he completed the passes. He moved the offense, went for 101 yards in his time in the game. I believe it was in the third quarter, I think it was. That Carr got knocked out with a shoulder injury. Chris Olave managed to come through for you with 8 catches on 11 targets for 104. What a man Chris Olave is. Michael Thomas, he kind of just has been exactly what he's been projected to be each week. I'm looking at it on Sleeper right now. And week 1, projected 8.9, scored 8.6. Week 2, projected 9.1, scored at even 9. Week 3, projected 9.2, scored at 8. And so, actually, you know what? I'm looking at half PPR scoring. So everything I said earlier about PPR scoring, that's actually half PPR. My mistake. Or no, it's not. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. These are all I am working in a half PPR world right now. That's my mistake. I meant to be looking at PPR. But I'm looking at half point. And Michael Thomas, 6 catches, 50 yards, 9 targets. That's a guy you can use, though. It's not the most exciting thing in the world, but he can get you something. Rashid Shaheed, he did nothing as far as the actual offense goes, but he did have the punt return touchdown, which should count towards his points in your league. If not, then I think you should get mad at your commissioner, because your commissioner is probably Tanner Ward. He does not like special teams touchdowns. But in my opinion, if the football player whose name is on my roster scores, that player should receive those points, because as been established on the show, points are fun, and I like fun. The Kendre Miller experiment this week did not quite go to plan. 9 carries, 34 yards, not much going there for Kendre. Tony Jones did get 8 carries also, so kind of an ugly split there as Kamara returns from his suspension this week. So we will see what that does to the offense. I would imagine Kendre could still find himself in a high upside handcuff kind of role, but Kamara is going to be their guy, and we'll see what that brings. Kamara wasn't that good last year. I think a lot of people kind of forget that when they think about Alvin Kamara, because they're just thinking about the suspension. But Kamara was incredibly frustrating last season. One last thing I did want to mention with this game before we move on is that Luke Musgrave looks to be a streaming tight end option once again, especially for as long as Christian Watson is out. He had 6 catches on 8 targets and 49 yards. On to the fun game of the weekend, the Denver Broncos. They scored 20 points. Nothing too great to see there. Miami Dolphins, 70 points. The most since I believe they said 1966. It's the most I can ever remember seeing outside of Madden, that's for sure. And what was kind of interesting with this is Tua didn't have I think this is Tua's second best game of the season, right? Wasn't his week 1 actually better? When he threw for 466 yards, probably depends on your scoring. But this week, Tua throws 23 for 26, so kind of not that many pass attempts for Tua. He didn't need it. 309 yards and 4 touchdowns on it, though, so he came through great for you. Tyreek Hill, he caught that bomb at the start of it. He ends up with 157 yards and a touchdown on 9 catches. Interestingly enough, though, no one else really did that much in the receiving game as far as wide receivers and tight ends go, because it all came from these running backs. Devin Achane, 18 carries, 203 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 catches, 30 yards, and 2 more touchdowns. Devin Achane had 9 career yards coming into this game and just totally smashed it here in week 3. He's owned in a lot of leagues. I would say any 12-team leagues, anything deeper than that for sure. Devin Achane's on rosters. If he's not, he's the obvious number 1 pickup. And the thing that excites me about Devin Achane, most of his scoring and real work came early on in the game. He scored 2 of the team's first 3 touchdowns. Raheem Mostert also smashed it this week. He had 13 carries for 82 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground, and then he added another 7 catches, 60 yards and a touchdown through the air. Both these running backs just absolutely crushing it this week. Interestingly, Mostert's touchdowns, though, all kind of came later on in the game when the game was out of reach. So I don't know. Take with that what you will. That gives me a little bit extra excitement for Devin Achane, that he might be the guy that they turn to and look at moving forward as their main back. Obviously, he looked great today. So did Mostert, though, so they could go both guys. But I really like the fact that A-Chain kind of got the early work in this one while it was still close. On the Denver side, we're going to have a couple of these this week where it's really hard to kind of take away things from a blowout. And I think the Broncos are kind of in that boat a little bit. A ton of pass attempts out of them because they were losing. Only 38, actually. So it wasn't like they were throwing the ball a ton trying to catch up. That I guess you kind of have to wave the white flag at some point. But my big takeaway for this one is Courtland Sutton is a sell high. He had 8 catches for 91 yards and a touchdown. And he might be decent moving forward. He did lose 2 fumbles in this one. Coaches never like to see that. I think, though, Jerry Jeudy with his 5 catches for 81 yards and Marvin Mims having his 3 catches for 73 yards, those guys are coming. I think Marvin Mims, I said on last week's show, I'll say on this week's show, he's a stash candidate. If you've got the bench space, pick up Marvin Mims, put him on the bench. He's coming for this offense. He's on his way to a bigger workload. And he could be a second-half league winner, in my opinion. I think that's going to push Courtland Sutton out of this offense a little bit more because I don't think it'll be Jeudy necessarily. And keep in mind, too, one of these guys could get traded. We heard a lot of rumors about that in the offseason, but in the NFL, I would never count on that. NFL trades are far more rare than they are in the MLB or the NBA or the NHL, especially midseason ones with important players. So I wouldn't count on that, but that's a possibility in order to open up those Marvin Mims opportunities. I think Mims is definitely a guy to have on your rosters, though, and I think he could be a second-half league-winning candidate. I would sell high on Courtland Sutton if I can. I think, I would try to get a wide receiver 2 value for him whenever I feel like he's more like a flex option, in my opinion. Next up, the Los Angeles Chargers, 28, the Minnesota Vikings, 24. And this was a interesting game because I feel like, we all really thought it was going to be this fire-breathing, high-scoring affair going into it, and the first half really wasn't. A little slow in the first half. Things picked up, though, in the second half, and pretty much all the guys that you wanted to have smash in this one did, especially on the Chargers side of things, except for Joshua Kelly. We'll get to him in just a second. Justin Herbert, those for over 400 yards and 3 touchdowns, come through for you with 35 points. Keenan Allen, Mr. Small Game, that Tanner Ward besmirched the good name of. He's just awesome. He is absolutely outstanding. Scored 38 half PPR points this week. He did have a 49-yard touchdown pass, so that's going to kind of change things up a little bit there as far as what it would be. But don't let that fool you. 18 catches on 20 targets for 215 yards. That's a Puka Nacua kind of stat line right there. Great game out of Keenan. Really nice one for Mike Williams. Also came through for you with 7 catches on 8 targets, 121 yards, and a touchdown. However, he did leave with a knee injury. I believe it was knee. It might have been ankle. I haven't seen anything specific on it. It was a leg injury. It didn't look great. He left on the cart with a towel over the head. You never want to speculate, but we kind of have to for our purposes. Not what you want to see from Mike Williams. I think that could bring Josh Palmer into play. He caught the late touchdown to win. Quentin Johnson is the one I think all of us would really like to see be the winner of the Mike Williams injury. Winners are kind of a bad way to phrase it, but the guy who could get more targets in this offense if there's one less target in the offense. I think we'd all like to see that be Quentin Johnson, but I think it could be Josh Palmer. It might be. He kind of played that role in the second half, fourth quarter of this one. On to the Vikings side of things, Jordan Addison, he got 8 targets in this one. That's encouraging to me. I've really liked what I've seen out of Jordan Addison. He's another one of these rookies. I think a lot of these rookie wide receivers could be really great in the second half of the season. And it's not like he had a monster game today, but 6 catches for 52 yards, no touchdown in this one for him. That just kind of leaves him as being buyable, I think. Like, that's going to leave it to where, you could send trade offers. I think I would trade Courtland Sutton for Jordan Addison. That's a move I would make just thinking of a guy I've already talked about. You probably get even more than just Addison potentially for Sutton. But that's a move I would make. Do I have anything else? Oh, Alexander Madison did come through for you in this one. So if you can trade him, I maybe would. But, also, like I said, I don't know if Cam Akers is actually good. And this was the first good matchup for Alexander Madison on the season. He came through for you. So maybe there is still some hope out there for Alexander Madison. On to the next one. Not much to say on this one. The New England Patriots 15, beating the New York Football Jets to 10. Mac Jones didn't really do a whole heck of a lot, 201 yards and a touchdown. Zach Wilson did even less with 157 yards. It was bad weather. These are bad offenses. It was a pretty bad storm there on both ways of looking at that. A lot of rush attempts, though, for the New England backfield. And Ezekiel Elliott getting a lot of work in this one. I think that was mostly just kind of because they were running it so much that they were getting Zeke so involved in it. And he didn't look great with them by any means. He didn't look any better than Ramondre with his run. So I still don't view Ezekiel Elliott as a threat to Ramondre Stevenson, really. On the Jets side of things, I think it's time to maybe hit the panic button a little bit. For sure for Dalvin Cook, of course. Like, he's a veteran. He's shown really nothing through 3 weeks. Breece Hall, I just want to see him to get the ball more, but he got the ball 12 times in this one on the ground. He only got 18 yards out of it. Again, sloppy field, bad offenses. Defense was anticipating the run. But against Zach Wilson, you're always going to be anticipating a run because do you even need to cover a pass? It just makes me worried that Breece Hall is just going to have these kind of low attempt, low efficiency games for a while now. You know, it's been 2 weeks since he broke that big one in week 1. That's starting to fade from memory a little bit now. And I don't know. I was worried about Breece coming into the season. Week 1 was very encouraging. I don't have snap rate yet, but he only played 31% and 34% of the snaps in weeks 1 and 2. I don't think he played much more than that. Getting only 12 carries doesn't scream to me that he was out there 50% or anything like that. So I don't know. I'm just, this entire Jets offense is becoming more and more in a void. Garrett Wilson, 5 catches, 48 yards. Probably about what you could expect. I would have hoped for more because the New England secondary is so depleted. But again, with the bad weather, it was going to be what it was going to be. On to a more fun offense here. The Buffalo Bills win 37-3 over the Washington Red Football Commanders. And Josh Allen coming through for you with 23 points in this one. Only 218 yards passing, but he did throw a touchdown. He did run a touchdown in as well. And that's actually the first thing I want to focus on here. So I have a stat for you. And you can determine for yourself whether or not this matters, whether or not you care. But we talked a lot in the preseason about Josh Allen's rushing and whether or not he was going to keep on running as much as he was getting a little bit older. You know, he's kind of starting to get to that age where you would potentially see a slowdown in that rushing production. He's 27 now. And today he ran 3 carries for 46 yards. He did have a touchdown. Last week, he ran 3 times for just 7 yards. He did not have a single game or a single back-to-back game stretch with 3 carries or fewer in 2022. He has actually only had 1 back-to-back game stretch of 3 carries or fewer in his career prior to this current one. So take with that what you will. He got you the touchdown. It looks great. Hey, maybe you can convert that into Jalen Hurts or Patrick Mahomes, right? The quarterbacks that are at his level. Like I'm not moving him down a tier because of this. I just think that it is the red flag that I was a bit not even red, the yellow flag that I was a bit nervous about going into the season. I think is there. I think it's still there. I think it's well alive and good. And that makes me a little bit nervous. It is a great thing, though, for James Cook. James Cook continues to own this backfield outside of the red zone. Once again, Latavius Murray steals a touchdown from him. It's incredibly frustrating for James Cook, but he looks good. He looks like he belongs out there. And if this offense can become just a little bit less Josh Allen-centric, that's a great thing for James Cook. On the Washington side of things, again, it's really hard to take things away from blowouts, but the one thing I do take away from is Brian Robinson got 10 carries. He got 70 yards out of it. He came through for you enough. It's not a good game, but he was not totally game scripted out of the offense. And by the way, once again, Antonio Gibson fumbled. Once again, Antonio Gibson was not good at football. And once again, I think if Antonio Gibson's stock continues to plummet, that is only good things for Brian Robinson, right? Like if Gibson's going to fumble on his 4 touches he does get, then he's going to get even less than 4, which is a good thing for B-Rob. On to the next. Oh, by the way, also Cole Turner, just a name to throw out there. He got 7 targets and he plays tight end, so 7 targets matter when you play tight end. Next game here, and this one, maybe the second most surprising upset of the day. The Houston Texans get the 37-17 win over the Jacksonville Jaguars. And let's start with the Jags on this one. I think Trevor Lawrence in this offense is just kind of broken at the moment. I don't want to say that it reminds me too much of the Cleveland Browns a handful of years ago when they got Odell, but that's kind of almost like the vibes I'm getting a little bit here, where like we were all really excited with this young team taking this big leap, and they have this shiny new weapon. And yeah, it hasn't looked all that good, actually, has it? Like, good week 1, but weeks 2 and 3, not too hot here for the Jags. I'm not panicking yet, though. I'm not freaking out on it too much. Their schedule is failing to load for me. Here we go. They have Atlanta, at Buffalo, and Indy in their next 3 games. I think that is a perfectly fine schedule to have coming up here. But yeah, not good against Kansas City. Not good against Houston. They were pretty good against Indy the first time. I think there's a reason why we had Trevor Lawrence at the back of the tier 2. I think Tanner, he had the Prince 2 ahead of him, rightfully so. I think Trevor belongs probably in that 3rd tier quarterbacks right now. And that's where he's going to live. And in the good matchups, you can play him with great confidence. And in rougher matchups, this might be more of what you get from kind of a little bit Dak Prescottian, if you will. On the receiving weapon side of things, Christian Kirk came through again with a touchdown for his big week last week. Calvin Ridley, to me, he's a buy low. And it's going to be tough, though, because I feel like the people who drafted Calvin Ridley were the Calvin Ridley guys, right? He was going so early in drafts because there's always one guy in the league who was a Calvin Ridley guy. And so it's going to be tough to buy low on him, but if you can find somebody who's not believing in him anymore after that big week 1 that he had, yeah, I would shoot an offer or 2 because it's 2 quiet games, but he had 8 targets in week 2, he had 7 targets in this one. I think better days are to come for Calvin Ridley. Christian Kirk, though, I think is going to hang right around as kind of that flex option for you. I'm getting a phone call. We're going to go ahead and not take that. I don't know that number. Who else do we have here? Evan Ingram came through for your great leader tight end. These games are going to happen from time to time with him. He's going to be good every once in a while. Travis Etienne dominated the volume for the Jacksonville Jaguars in this one, but Tank Bigsby stole a touchdown. That's one thing that a lot of us were fearing with Travis Etienne going into the season. One of my favorite pickups from last week, Tank Dell, he came through the big one here. 5 catches for 145 yards and a touchdown. If he is out there in your leagues, him and Devin A-Chain are the top 2 pickups for me. If they're available, they probably aren't. They shouldn't be, at least, but they might be. So go check. Dameon Pierce is a sell high candidate for me. Also, he got in the end zone, but he had 14 carries for just 31 yards. He did catch 3 passes for 28 yards. The number this week looks decent enough to where maybe you can sell him. And a lot of teams are also very desperate for running backs. So if you can find that team in your league who's been ravaged by injuries at running back, try and sell them on Dameon Pierce and get something for him. One last thing on this game, Nico Collins had a bit of a stinker in this one. Just 2 catches on 3 targets, but I'm still a believer in Nico as kind of a flex option for you. Next up is the big upset of the day. The Arizona Cardinals, 28, beating the Dallas Cowboys, 16. This is a weird one in a lot of ways because Arizona won. Dak had, 249 yards, only 1 touchdown, 1 pick. You would have liked to have seen him get a second touchdown. He threw that pick in the end zone, and that was quite unfortunate there for any Dak Prescott owners like I am. Tony Pollard, another 23 carries on this one. He is getting a full workhorse back role. And I think if we were redrafting today, I think Tony Pollard's RB2. I think it's only Christian McCaffrey who I would rather have than Tony Pollard at this point. Like, he's getting the full-fledged workhorse workload. And so many other guys have gotten hurt. Maybe that just means that Tony Pollard is going to be next, but hopefully not. He's been awesome for you. Do I have anything else to say on the Cowboys? Michael Gallup with a nice game. He can be a flex option for you. He with his 7 targets, maybe more of a bench guy, but if you're in a pinch, you can use him. Jake Ferguson, another 7 targets for the Cowboys. On the other side, the tight ends, only 2 targets for Zach Ertz. Very disappointing there after he's really been involved in the offense recently. And then Rondale Moore, I'm just not falling for it. He scored that touchdown today out of the backfield, but we've read that book before in Rondale. It's kind of low involvement and low yardage, and I'm not into it. Next up, the Kansas City Chiefs blow out the Chicago Bears 41-10. And that's another one. I just don't have much takeaway from a blowout in this one. There's really just not much to learn moving forward with it. The Chiefs are awesome. The Bears kind of stink. This is what's going to happen when that kind of comes together sometimes. Justin Fields, I talked earlier this week about how I'm a little bit nervous about Justin Fields, and I am now every bit as nervous as I was before, maybe even more so. He only came away with 99 passing yards and 47 rushing yards. He did get you a passing touchdown to DJ Moore. DJ Moore shaking up on that play, though, so keep an eye on that for DJ. Running-wise for Chicago, we want to keep an eye on that backfield split. 8 carries for Roschon, 7 for Khalil Herbert. But again, I have a hard time knowing how much of that was the score's out of hand, let's just play the rookie, right? There can always be an element of that in there. Similarly with pretty much all the Chiefs players, right? Like Rashee Rice had a nice game. So did Sky Moore. So, Justin Watson caught a deep one. But like that, it's just so hard to take away things from a blowout. And somehow I talked about this game and I did not reference Taylor Swift until the very end of it. So I am better than everybody else who wants to talk about this football game. On to the Seattle Seahawks winning 37-27 over the Carolina Panthers. And in this one, my biggest takeaway, number one, is that Kenneth Walker might be the player I was most wrong about this preseason. I think at this point, I'd move Ken Walker. If we're redrafting today, I would need to look at the names exactly. But I think at this point, it's hard to say he's not a top 15 running back, top 12 running back, maybe. Is he an RB1 now for the season? He probably is. But he had one of the best games this week as I pull up week 3's standings here among running backs. He was RB3 this week with his 30.6 points. He was awesome this week, man. Kenneth Walker, and he's been awesome. He was wide receiver or running back 12 coming into the game, just running back 3 this week, so he's definitely top 12. He's probably top 5 on the season, I would guess now. And yeah, I think he might be the player I was most wrong about. Zach Charbonnet, though, I think it's still a hold if you can as a high-end handcuff option. On the and also Jackson Smith, the Jigba, I think is still a stash, but you cannot play him. You cannot play him until you see something. 1 catch, 3 targets, 10 yards. Tyler Lockett's going to have these games. This is ebbs and flows of Tyler Lockett, right? A dud this week after a big game last week. He might have a big game again next week. It's the thing that is frustrating about having Tyler Lockett, but it's also the reason why you have Tyler Lockett is for those big games. But you just eat these bad games when they come. It is what it is with him. DK with a nice 112-yard game for you. On the Carolina side of things, Andy Dalton was quarterback. Definitely played it up a little bit for those receivers. Adam Thielen having 11 catches at 145 yards and a touchdown. It is 2023, so that is crazy to see a 45-year-old have that kind of a game. DJ Chark had that nice touchdown for the Carolina Panthers as well, so that was good to see. Miles Sanders comes through for you with a rushing touchdown. Only 9 carries, 24 yards, 5 catches, though, and 38. Keeps him involved in the offense. He's a guy, we talked about Derrick Henry earlier, how Derrick Henry, when the Titans trail by a whole lot, he's not really involved in the offense. Miles Sanders, when they're trailing, still a part of the offense. He catches those passes, even when they're kind of forced to throw and get out of their game plan. And that is it for the Sunday slate. So that'll do it for me here tonight as we get ready to watch some Sunday night football. Big, exciting Vegas Raiders and Pittsburgh Steelers matchups. So be sure to tune back in later on this week. I'll have a waiver wire show for you here coming up in the next day or so. We'll go through some of those adds and drops, some guys that kind of stood out this week. Like I said, off the top of my head, it really kind of is just Tank Dell and Devin Achane as the big ones. I think those Chargers wide receivers, I think are definitely a couple of guys I'll be putting some claims in, though. If Quentin Johnson did get dropped in any leagues, he may not have. But I think, Josh Palmer is a guy to maybe try to scoop up also. Are there any others that kind of stood out to me as guys that could be pickups? I don't think so. No, you know what? I skipped the Ravens game. Of all games for me to skip, maybe it's because I don't want to talk about it. I don't know. So let's talk about that one real quick. Of all games for me to, honest to goodness, I did not mean to skip it as a sad Baltimore Ravens fan here on a Sunday evening, as the Indianapolis Colts beat the Baltimore Ravens 22-19, and Justin Tucker missing a field goal, which leads to a loss here. So, let's talk about the Colts side of things first here. Zach Moss, 30 carries in this one for the Colts. A just awesome workload for him in this one. He's all alone in that backfield until Jonathan Taylor comes back. And look, I don't think Zach Moss is good, but I also can't imagine a coaching staff saying, here's the ball 30 times, and then just because Jonathan Taylor's returning from an ankle injury, we're not going to give you the ball at all. And also the shows if Taylor does get re-injured, knock on wood, we don't want it, but it's inevitable for running backs, as we've seen throughout the season. We need to discuss that possibility. Zach Moss is a great handcuff option because he's going to be alone then. And that's one thing me and Tanner talked about in the preseason was I really like those handcuffs where if the guy goes down, he's getting all of that work, right? It's not going to be a committee. It's not going to be split. Unlike on the Baltimore side of things where, Gus Edwards left the game with a concussion. Justice Hill did not play, but even before Gus got concussed, you saw Kenyon Drake getting in there. You saw Melvin Gordon getting in there. And keep an eye on Gus with that concussion. If both Hill and Gus are out next week when the Ravens play the Browns, I believe it is, and I think Melvin Gordon would be the guy to take the flyer on, but it's not a flyer I want to take. Michael Pittman came through just like everybody kind of thought he would with Gardner Minshew at quarterback. Good passing volume for the Colts. And on the Ravens side of things, I think Mark Andrews is a buy low. He's just not been a part of this offense since he's come back from that injury. I would imagine the injury is still kind of lingering and being a part of that. He's still my tight end, too, for redrafting today. I would trade any tight end except for Travis Kelce for Mark Andrews. And I think that it's worthwhile maybe sending a couple of those offers out there. And then the last thing we're just going to touch on real quick is Zay Flowers continuing to have a breakout season in his rookie year. I think this is a really – I was kind of down on this rookie class of wide receivers. They've come through, though. And not only have they come through, they've also really shown me the potential of them coming through more as the season goes on. And I'm excited for what they can be in the second half of the season. Zay Flowers in this one, 8 catches on 10 targets, only 48 yards. He's very much kind of a gadget player for them, but he's getting a good amount of volume with those opportunities. And if he's going to catch 8 short passes, it's why I don't like PPR. That's a great game for you. So I think it makes him really an option in this offense. And Bateman is just not involved. Odell's got the ankle injury. Aguilar is kind of involved. It's kind of the Zay Flowers show right now. And hopefully Andrews will get more opportunity to wreck that. But unless he doesn't, I think Zay Flowers could really be a guy for you. So, hey, we get to end things talking about the Baltimore Ravens. I always am going to enjoy that, even though I did not enjoy the ending of that game here today. So, keep an eye on the podcast. Follow us on Twitter at ADP Dudes. Follow me on Twitter at RealMattMormann. I just celebrated my 13th Twitter anniversary today. I feel very old, and that app was really good for 12 of those 13 years. But it is what it is. We're still on it. And keep a like, keep a follow on this podcast, and we will see you guys later on throughout the week. Like I said, I'll have some waivers for you guys here over the next couple days. I'll probably also have just a kind of other random topic episode, like try to throw one of those in per week if we can. And I'll have kind of a what to watch for preview for you guys again. And Tanner will have that starts and sits and his rankings podcast for you all later on this week.